This video was brought to you by the support on Patreon. If you want to support the channel further, be sure to check it out for some behind-the-scenes looks at future projects. Thank you to all who read the stuff I write on there. In 1935, 48-year-old Erwin Schrödinger conceived of a thought experiment to help explain the idea of quantum superposition. He conjured up a contraption in which a hypothetical cat, a flask of poison, a radioactive source, and a Geiger counter were placed in a sealed box. Upon detecting a single decaying atom, which was impossible to predict, the Geiger counter would trigger, causing the flask to shatter, thus killing the cat. To put it in the most simple terms, the experiment was meant to illustrate that the behavior of subatomic particles exists in a state of superposition. By linking the status of the cat to a random subatomic event, we create a paradox. A paradox in which the cat is simultaneously dead and alive, in superposition, so to speak, until we decide to observe the contents of the box. This experiment begged the question, at what point does a system in superposition cross a threshold to become a single observed outcome? At what point does it go the other way around? This now famous experiment, colloquially known as Schrödinger's cat, has enduring appeal in popular culture, due to the high academic level of the subject, but simple to parse terms of the experiment, giving people in the know a small point of pride in flexing their knowledge of trivia. At the same time, the more simple, paradoxical question of what's in the box has captivated audiences far and wide. We all want to know what's in that box, even if we might not like what we find inside. Perhaps my favorite example, an example that distills the question down to its childlike whimsicality, was from 2015 on an episode of the British comedy show 8 out of 10 Cats. Host Jimmy Carr invites fellow comedians, the late Sean Locke and John Richardson, to play a round of the now iconic game, Carrot in a Box. What ensued might be the best 5 minutes of British television ever aired.
Okay, let's play Carrot in a Box.
The game was quite simple. Both players want to end up with the carrot. One player is allowed to peek into their box to know its contents, and depending on what was inside, they now have to bluff the other player into giving them their box, or find a way to keep their own. Unlike Schrödinger's experiment, however, this time the Geiger counter, radioactive source, and poison flask are replaced by Sean Locke's devious acting. He really threw John Richardson into the mental blender with this one.
Okay, you now have to convince John to swap his box if you think he has the carrot, or keep your box. It's a game of bluff. The winner is the one with the carrot.
Oh, I'll keep this.
For John Richardson, the carrot is now in superposition. It exists in both boxes at the same time, yet when the game actions are complete, the carrot will only exist in one. Even after the swap, we might like to believe that the contents of the boxes are indeterminate, until the threshold of observance is crossed. John never should have opened that box. Now, you're probably wondering, what the hell all this has to do with magic? Not much, I'll admit, save for one peculiar moment in my recent memory. I take us now to 2023's Pro Tour Phyrexia. This tournament marked the return of the Pro Tour since they discontinued it in 2018. This being the first Pro Tour since the Pioneer format's inception, Pioneer was the format of choice for this competition. Our story follows two players. First, the up-and-coming Nathan Steuer, already an extremely accomplished player despite his age, and recently crowned world champion in 2022. And the Hall of Famer Reid, a player known for consistently putting up high tournament results and a beloved fan-favorite competitor. After day 2 of competition, both Duke and Steuer qualified for top 8 in 4th and 5th seed respectively, pitting them against each other in the quarterfinals. Nathan Steuer was piloting a deck called Lotus Field Combo, a deck that abuses the namesake land Lotus Field in combination with Thespian's Stage to generate large amounts of mana through various untap effects, eventually winning the game with a complicated sequence of tutors in order to cast Approach of the Second Sun twice. While Reid was playing Is It Creativity, named after the card Indomitable Creativity. Nowadays, decks of this type often leverage a turn 4 or 5 creativity, destroying their own tokens to cheat out a 1-card win condition, such as Atroxa Grand Unifier or Valgavoth Terror Eater. Reid Duke's version for this Pro Tour instead wanted to cast creativity for X equals 2, to cheat out the deck's only 2 creatures at the same time. The first was Worldspine Worm, a 15/15 trampler, but it wouldn't do much without his friend, the second creature, Xenagos God of Revels. Together, Xenagos could give Worldspine Worm +15/+15 and haste, allowing the worm to swing in for lethal damage even through most blockers. On the 5th turn of Game 1, Reid Duke is supposed to assemble his combo. He chooses to cast Indomitable Creativity for X equals 2, targeting his own reflection of Kiki Jiki and a treasure token. However, Nathan has interaction. He first cycles Vizier of Tumbling Sands to float a mana, and then channels Boseiju who endures, floating a second mana, and destroying the reflection of Kiki Jiki. This means Reid can only cheat out 1 creature with creativity. He flips a Soul Worldspine Worm onto the battlefield. All is not lost, however. He can creativity again next turn for Xenagos if Nathan doesn't remove the worm. On Reid's end step, Nathan uses the 2 mana to copy Lotus Field with Thespian Stage's ability. On Nathan's turn, despite having only 2 lands in play at the moment, he manages to combo off, eventually casting Emergent Ultimatum. Off of Ultimatum, he finds Lear, Disciple of the Drowned, Omniscience, and Behold the Beyond. He gets to cast 2 of these spells, of Reid's choice, for free. The flaw of this decision, or more accurately, the power of this dilemma, is that all of Reid's choices can be played around. If Reid gets rid of Lear, Behold the Beyond can just find Lear again. If Reid gets rid of Omniscience, Nathan has Lear and a huge graveyard full of ways to draw and make more mana. Getting rid of Behold the Beyond would lead to much of the same problem. Stuck in this catch-22, Reid shuffles back in the Lear and lets Nathan cast the other 2 cards for free. Nathan casts Omniscience and then Behold the Beyond, searching for any 3 cards in his library. He finds Mastermind's Acquisition, Balaged Recovery, and the same Lear from before. Using Mastermind's Acquisition, he grabs an Approach of the Second Sun from his sideboard and casts it. He plays Lear and then Balaged Recovery in order to get back Behold the Beyond. Using Behold the Beyond, he finds Approach of the Second Sun again, casting it for the 2nd time to win the game. Nathan was able to combo off just in time, before Xenagos was able to find its way onto the field. Game 2, still pre-sideboard, starts much in the same way. In fact, this game is almost identical to the first. On turn 5, Reid once again casts Creativity for 2, and again Nathan has Boseiju to stop the combo, and again cycling Vizier of Tumbling Sands beforehand to have enough mana to copy Lotus Field end of turn. Reid once again flips a single Worldspine Worm onto the battlefield before passing. Once again, Nathan is in a position where he has to try and win the game this turn, before Reid plays a second Creativity to find Xenagos. Just like in Game 1, Nathan starts tapping and untapping his Lotus Fields, eventually casting Emergent Ultimatum. This time, Reid doesn't make Nathan go through the combo motions, and scoops. The players move on to Game 3. As the players go to sideboard, Reid is in a tough position. He's down 0-2. He now has to win 3 straight games to make the comeback. Nathan was on a mulligan to 5 in Game 2, and yet still managed to defeat Reid. Post-sideboard, things aren't looking great for our Hall of Famer either. Nathan's deck can bring in copies of Fading Hope, which would disrupt the Worm Xenagos combo for just 1 blue mana. Reid's deck has options though. In his sideboard, he runs 2 copies of Hullbreaker Horror, allowing him to swap out his one-punch combo for a more control-oriented game plan. To supplement this new strategy are copies of Shark Typhoon, and more counterspells like Negate, Mystical Dispute, Disdainful Stroke, and Narset's Reversal. Another layer deeper, if Nathan knows that Reid will be switching to a quote-unquote counter-everything game plan, he can side in his copies of Dragonlord Dromoka and Sphinx of the Final Word to make his spells uncounterable. At this, the mind games have begun. What secrets do each player have hidden in their deck? After the players are done sideboarding, Game 3 begins with Reid on the play. Paul Cheon lets us know that Reid has in fact brought in both copies of Hullbreaker Horror, taking out the Worm combo. He's also sided out a copy of Indomitable Creativity, since it's not totally necessary to cheat out the Hullbreaker. He can always hardcast it in the late game. Nathan seems to be off to a slower start this time, and with Reid's hand loaded with counterspells, Reid's control plan seems to be going well. On Nathan's turn 5, he attempts to cast Sylvan Scrying, looking to tutor up his Lotus Field. Reid thinks for a minute, and decides to counter with Make Disappear, sacrificing his reflection of Kiki Jiki to pay the casualty cost, truly showing he's dedicated to making his control game plan work. On turn 7, Nathan attempts to cast Pour Over the Pages, and Reid has the perfect answer. He casts Narset's Reversal, copying the spell for himself. Reid is slowly climbing ahead and ahead, as he gets to the point where he can cast a Hullbreaker Horror and shut down Nathan's deck. Turn 8 rolls around, and Nathan, stuck on 5 lands, again tries to cast Pour Over the Pages. Reid responds with Big Score, digging further into his deck, and then casts a Spell Pierce to counter the Pour. On turn 9, Nathan plays his first Lotus Field, and attempts to cast Hidden Strings to untap it, in order to produce enough mana to cast Sphinx of the Final Word. If this creature resolves, it would make all of Nathan's instants and sorceries uncounterable, significantly hindering Reid's control game plan. Reid evaluates the threat accordingly and negates the hidden string so that Nathan can't untap his lands. Good negate, Paul Cheon says.
Reid is gonna negate the hidden strings.
Good negate.
The most difficult part for Reid now is finding a window to hardcast his 7-mana creature safely, without giving an opportunity for Nathan to resolve a big spell. He finds it on turn 10, when he has 9 mana up. That way, in response to a spell from Nathan, he can flash in the Hullbreaker and cast a 2-mana spell to bounce whatever Nathan puts on the stack. When Nathan taps out for Sphinx of the Final Word, Reid flashes in Hullbreaker Horror in response, and then casts Impulse, triggering the Hullbreaker to bounce the Sphinx off the stack, back into Nathan's hand. The next turn, Reid attacks with a Goblin Shaman token, Hullbreaker Horror, and Hall of Storm Giants for 16 damage. Lethal damage. And now we arrive at what I would describe as the pivotal Game 4. Reid has proved that his plan works. The question is, can he do it again? The players go to sideboard once more, making any other adjustments they want based on the information they gleaned from Game 3. Game 4 begins, and Nathan appears to be off to a fast start. Turn 1, Arboreal Grazer puts a Temple of Mystery onto the battlefield. Nathan has 2 lands in play already to Reid 0. A couple turns later, Nathan has his Lotus Field in play, and attempts to cast Balaged Recovery targeting Sylvan Scrying, so that he can find Thespian's stage and begin his combo. Reid knows how important that is, and decides to counter the Balaged Recovery. This stifles Nathan's game plan in 2 major ways. The first, obvious one, is that he now cannot tutor for Thespian's stage. The second, and less obvious one, is that Nathan is down to 1 land in hand, meaning that if he naturally draws a second Lotus Field, he can't play it since he doesn't have enough lands to sacrifice. In hindsight, perhaps he could have played Balaged Recovery on the land side instead of trying to resolve the spell. The next turn, in perfect comedic timing, Nathan draws a second Lotus Field, getting exactly punished for playing his Balaged Recovery as a spell instead of a land. On turn 7, Reid casts Creativity for X = 2, looking to put both of his Hullbreaker Horrors into play. These 2 creatures would pretty much shut down Nathan's entire game plan. The problem is Nathan is not dead immediately, and Reid is basically tapped out. If Nathan can find a way to combo off on his turn, then the 2 Hullbreaker Horrors won't matter. Creativity resolves, and Reid starts flipping through his deck.
And it's been sitting there for a long time.
Yeah. Although, does he just have the combo? I'm wondering if you should just attack.
Oh, look at this! He's got the combo
He
back
has the
in?
combo!
Are we gonna see Xenagos
This
here?
is it's gotta be Xenagos.
Incredible! Oh, the rope-a-dope from Reid, dude!
What's he gonna do for Game 3?
Reid slams in for 30 damage. The commentators are bewildered. As Paul Cheon stated,
I was just expecting some 7/8s.
Reid, for some reason, took out the Hullbreaker Horrors and brought back in the Xenagos Worm combo. If we listen to the commentary between Games 3 and 4, Paul Cheon and Marshall Sutcliffe had discussed the potential Game 4 sideboard strategies for both players. Marshall Sutcliffe points out the ability for Reid's deck to switch between modes.
You know, he has the ability to kind of take this more controlling route or to go for the more combo-oriented route, and he could even switch back and forth to kind of keep Nathan off balance. But one is probably just a lot better than the other.
Yeah.
Right? Where they're not, it's not like, well, these are two close strategies and it's just a rock, paper, scissors thing. One of them probably just better, right?
Yeah.
And Reid's going to have to pick that one, and I'm assuming it's the control route.
Yeah.
As Sutcliffe describes, the control shell certainly seems to be the more dominant strategy. It was clear how effective it was at dissecting Nathan's game plan in Game 3. Reid is not choosing between rock, paper, and scissors. He's instead choosing between scissors and a scalpel. During all of Game 4, Cheon and Sutcliffe were commentating and providing insight, centered around the idea that Reid is running the Hullbreaker Horrors.
You could also go big score into negate if you wanted to just dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, those treasures,
Right.
they have value, but they're not quite as critical as when you're trying to combo off.
If I go for the creativity, I'm basically tapped out,
Okay.
right? And I'm not going to have the mana if you try to go off. So you sack the treasure, make 2 tokens, next turn creativity for
Make spirits channel.
for 2. Then you can play a land and you'll still have up Fire Prophecy as a way to bounce a spell. Once he has
Right.
the,
He just needs
the Hullbreaker
anything
Horror.
instant speed that he can put on the stack.
Right.
So imagine their shock when Reid flips that worm off of Indomitable Creativity. He certainly had everyone in the palm of his hand. I think what's important to note about professional in-person Magic is how the players sideboard. Rather than pick and swap out a couple cards they want to change, they instead shuffle the entire pile into the main deck, and then pick out the 15 cards they don't want. This way, their opponents cannot tell whether or not they've actually made changes, and helps further disguise what their game plan might be. This is what allowed Reid Duke to be able to pull off such a brilliant play. Going into the 5th game, like Sean Locke and John Richardson, like Schrödinger and his cat, Reid Duke now has Nathan, the commentators, and us in the proverbial quantum paradox. What will Game 5 bring forth? Reid has revealed the ace up his sleeve. He swapped in the combo to sneak out a quick win. Will he load up the same trick twice? The 4 cards are in superposition. The commentators are on the edge of their seats. The match has evolved beyond that of a normal Magic game. This is now a game of carrot in a box. Paul Cheon gets the audience involved in this one.
Combo or control? What do you think, chat? Game 5. Combo or control?
What's your vote?
The commentators shared the sentiment that it felt too risky to go with the combo, since Nathan has so many more disruption tools post-sideboard. Paul places his bets that Reid switch back to the control game plan. Marshall concurs. With that, Game 5 begins. A game for the history books. On turn 3, Nathan plays his Lotus Field on curve, with Thespian's stage in hand, getting ready to assemble his combo. In his hand is Dragon Lord Dromoka, which is an uncounterable spell, and would make it so that Reid can't interact during Nathan's turn. On Nathan's end step, Reid casts Impulse, looking 4 cards deep into his library, and choosing 1. He finds Fable of the Mirror Breaker and Big Score, 2 cards that would really help him dig through the deck to find his Indomitable Creativity. Reid knows how crucial it is to stop Nathan from advancing his game plan, so instead he chooses Make Disappear, a counterspell. Reid plays a land and passes the turn. On Nathan's turn 4, Nathan plays Thespian's stage. Nathan now performs a tricky sequence in order to generate enough mana to cast Dragon Lord Dromoka. He taps Thespian's stage and Lotus Field, floating 3 blue and a colorless. He uses 2 mana to cycle Vizier of Tumbling Sands, untapping Lotus Field. He now taps Lotus Field for 3 green, using 1 green and 1 blue to cycle a second Vizier, untapping Lotus Field. And now he taps for 3 white. With 3 white, 2 green, and 1 blue, he puts the all-important Dragon Lord Dromoka on the stack. Reid, suspecting a play coming this turn, responds with Ether Gust, which bypasses the uncounterable clause on Dromoka, and Nathan regrettably has to put Dromoka back on top of his library. On his next turn, Nathan is forced to pass in order to keep up mana to copy Lotus Field. Reid cycles a Shark Typhoon on Nathan's end step to make a 1/1 Shark. Tokens hitting the field signals to Nathan that a potential creativity is coming soon. But does Reid have the combo? On Reid's turn, he finds a big score, which would help him dig and make more tokens. He chips Nathan for 1 damage, plays a land, and passes. Nathan copies Lotus Field with Thespian Stage on Reid's end step. On turn 6, Nathan taps for 6 and casts Dragon Lord Dromoka again, and this time it resolves. It's a huge flying lifelink 5/7, which, if it starts dealing damage, could put Nathan out of combo range. But if it's not combo, Reid could always bounce the Dromoka back to Nathan's hand with Hullbreaker Horror. At this moment, Nathan is tapped out. The window of opportunity is open for Reid Duke. He casts Big Score on Nathan's end step, pitching a Sokenzan. Among the 2 cards, he finds an Indomitable Creativity. And now the moment comes. Which box is the worm in, the sideboard or the deck? Is this cat Nathan Steuer, dead or alive? Reid casts Creativity for X = 2, destroying his own 2 treasure tokens. He begins to flip. The crowd holds its breath.
It's going to be a Hullbreaker. Oh, it's Xenagos! He actually has the combo in the combo!
For Nathan and the crowd, the threshold of superposition does not fade until Reid flips the creature. You can even hear until the final moment, Marshall still believes that the Hullbreaker Horrors are in the box.
It's going to be a Hullbreaker. Oh, it's Xenagos!
But as John Richardson said,
Does it contain a carrot or not?
Reid smashes in for 24 damage, dealing exactly lethal, since Nathan would gain 5 from Dromoka blocking. The comeback has been completed, in perhaps the most unsuspecting way possible. A 30-30 hasty worm and satyr friend flying out of the library, disguised as 2 big lobsters until the final moments. In so many ways, this game is as much poetry as it is perfection. In games 4 and 5, Reid never revealed any of his creatures in mulligans or draws, allowing us, the viewers, to enjoy those games in maximum suspense. In Game 5, he was able to find Indomitable Creativity on the perfect turn, dealing exact damage to win the game. In his post-game interview with Cedric Phillips, Cedric asks Reid what the thought process was behind his Game 4 and 5 sideboard decisions. Reid, in so few words, describes the matchup.
It matters more how the cards are played and less what the cards are, which is kind of a long way of saying I just didn't want Nathan to know what I was doing and, you know, make it tough on him and keep him guessing.
Indomitable Creativity, flavor-wise I think, is a representation of the Renegade's ingenuity against the Consulate trying to put them in a box. Reid had to think outside of that box in order to keep everyone guessing what was waiting inside of it. His creativity went beyond the table, beyond Schrödinger's thought experiment. No more Geiger counters, no more poison flasks, just 4 cards and the most devious mind games played on the Pro Tour cameras. Reid would go on to win this tournament, resulting in his first ever first place finish at the Pro Tour, adding to his ever-growing list of professional Magic accolades. But to me, that quarterfinals match is definitely my favorite game I've seen him play. Thank you for letting me share it with you, and thanks for watching.
Hold on, 31 damage coming in, 7 of it gets blocked.
That's 23. Oh, 31.
24. 24.
And then
5 life is gained. Wait, that's exactly lethal, right?
And look at this, both of the creatures are hitting the red zone, and Reid Duke has completed the comeback. He was down